So many of us feel like we are the only ones, we're the only generation, we're the only individual, we're the only community that is standing and feeling the tension of the fragility of the world. We think, my goodness, we're the only ones who have ever experienced brokenness like this, or fear or famine like we are now. It's never been as bad as it is today in terms of the difference in classes and socioeconomic status. And we stand in this place of thinking and believing that we are the only ones, or we're the first ones to ever walk through something like this. But the interesting thing is that our faith, the people of faith, the people of God, our livelihood, our stories are stories of people who have been held in bondage. Our own faith holds the story of corrupted leaders, of a leader who thought it was okay to enslave a people and make them work for pennies. And Pharaoh knew that he could break their backs physically and not give them a livable wage and demand, because in the midst of it being their meager job, it was all that they had. And Pharaoh abused the power and enslaved a people. And then there were men who stood up against the culture and said, I am not going to bow down to what you're asking me to. I'm not going to let you manipulate who my God is and what I think God is all about. And they said, I'm not going to claim who you want me to claim as God. I'm not going to lean into that. No, I don't care if I lose my life. And they were put into a furnace. There have been people along the way that were born different than the majority of the community. People that looked different, that had different abilities, that had different eyesights. They had different mental, physical capabilities. And you know what? They were shunned from the community. They were set on the outside, left to beg, always fighting for their rights to come in, to be part of what was happening at the temple. And then there's been this socioeconomic class throughout our history of faith. Those who boasted that they could give more. They wanted everybody in the temple. They wanted everybody to know how much they gave and what it was for, while sneering at the one who was giving everything they could. You see, we are not the only ones who have felt the tension. No, our faith is filled with people who felt the tension, who felt the brokenness, who saw the fragileness of the world, who looked around and all they could see was corruption. And in every generation of God's people, there were individuals that began to stand up. In the midst of what felt like the storms, in the midst of felt like everything was going to come crashing in on them, there were individuals that did something different. They pushed all of that, all of the fear, all of the angst, and somehow deep inside of them, they became the innkeeper of hope. They didn't just welcome hope in. They didn't just make room for this hope, this sense of everlasting trust in a God that they loved. No, they housed it. They helped to grow it. They helped to sustain it when communities were flittering to and fro and were wandering in the desert for 40 years. They helped to sustain it when the giants came up and made them feel like they could not win the battle. They encouraged it. They encouraged this hope in people in saying, yes, you can. And so the Shadrachs, Meshachs, and Abednego's, they didn't burn in the fire. No, because somebody somewhere along the way had housed the holiness of hope, had said to the people, our God is one that gives us a process of being redeemed. Our God is one that looks after us. Our God is one that is always coming before us and standing with us and is making our world better. They took the time to house that holiness, to give hope a place to come forth, to be spoken. And what happened is, along the way, in every situation, there was a process of redemption. It wasn't easy, but Miriam stood on the side of the riverbanks as Moses put his staff there. And she hoped beyond hope that not just the front of the line would make it across, but that every single person who had been enslaved would make it to the other side and know a new life. And her hope came springing forth in a song. And the redemption of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came as an angel covered. When the heat was right at the temperature it should have been burning, there was a coolness, a sense that they were going to make it out. And for those who were born with leprosy, those who were born with a physical ailment, Jesus opened the door for them and brought them into community. And for the people who made such a ruckus about how much they could give and how much their gift meant to the temple, Jesus didn't honor them. No, there was the hope that every single gift, every single penny, when people gave from all that they were and all that they had, that was what would grow the kingdom. You see, we're not the first ones to stand in this awful place that we've been in the last 19 months. But there is this thing happening. This season is calling us. It's asking us if we will be the individuals. If we will be the individuals that don't just make room for hope, that don't just talk about it, but that we house it, that we let it grow, that we take hope and we start to stand up against the corruption, that we call people out when they are manipulative, when they are abusing their sense of power, that we raise our voices in thanksgivings when we are with the broken and the weary, and the one that's standing on the outside of community. Now, we don't have to accomplish every single thing. No, our hope is individual. Our hope is about the everlasting God coming into the situations that we are presently involved in, and that looks different and unique for every single one of us. And if we're going to house the hope, if we're going to be people who in this season house the holy of holy and make room and become like the innkeepers, are we going to nourish that hope for somebody else? Are we going to be the ones to stand up and raise our voices and to say, when you don't have it and because you can't believe in it right now, I've got you covered? And stand in that spot and let the flame of hope slowly begin to invade their own spirit. We're making room for a lot of things in our lives right now. We've moved furniture around for Christmas trees. We're making room for the presents. We're making room on our calendars for all the parties that we want to attend. But the question becomes, are we making room and are we going to house the Holy of Hope? Are we going to be the hope to raise our voice, to stand with the broken, and to talk in confidence about the redemption that God brings us today and that God will bring us tomorrow? What are you going to make room for this season? What are you going to house in the depths of your being? Let us pray.